My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 28 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. When I was 18, I found out the man my mother married, Richard Hoffman, had stolen the $80,000 college trust my late father left me. While I scrubbed dishes after midnight shifts and lived on instant noodles, he was bleeding my inheritance dry to chase his fantasy of being a businessman. My mother stood beside him, watching it happen. But what neither of them knew was that my dad hadn't only left me money, he'd left me a letter, and that letter would become the weapon that destroyed them both. The summer before college, I was glowing with pride when Reed College offered me a full scholarship. My mom, Linda, clapped her hands like she was relieved. Richard beamed, patting me on the shoulder. "See? You don't even need the fund your dad left. We can save it for something important." The way he said it sounded final, like my future was already his project to manage. I didn't argue. I was naive enough to think that if Mom was smiling, it meant everything was safe. The truth, which I wouldn't learn until years later, was already sealed in legal paperwork in Seattle. My father had established a trust through a law firm there, $80,000 earmarked for my education, released to me the moment I turned 18. The trustee was my mother, and then the fund was supposed to pass directly into my hands. That transfer never happened. Instead, I spent my freshman year sprinting between classes and campus jobs. 18 credits by day, 2 shifts by night, library assistant during the week, barista on weekends. My dorm light stayed on later than anyone's. My hands cracked from scrubbing coffee pots. My grades slipped under the weight of exhaustion. One night, half asleep over my laptop, I called home and asked, "Mom, didn't Dad leave something for college? Why am I working myself sick?" Her tone turned sharp. "Sarah, money isn't everything. You're learning responsibility. We'll talk about it when you're older." Older? I was already 18. That winter break, I came home to what looked like a quiet house. But as I pulled off my boots, I heard Richard's voice drifting from his office. "The Northwest location is bleeding money. I need another 15 grand or we're shutting down by February." His dream was 3 artisanal coffee shops he'd opened the year before. I'd grown up watching him pitch ideas like a magician promising gold from air. But this was the first time I realized the magic was all debt. I stood frozen in the hallway, the sound of him pacing, muttering numbers. My stomach dropped. 15 grand, Dad's fund, my fund. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain replayed Mom's evasive answers, Richard's voice, my empty bank account. At 2 a.m, I crept downstairs. His office door was closed, but I knew his weakness: arrogance. He never locked his laptop. The glow of the screen lit my face as I clicked into his inbox. Subject lines stacked in neat rows. Wire transfer confirmations. Mitchell Trust account. Linda's daughter's fund. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the computer. The first email stared back at me like a confession. Subject line: Linda's daughter's fund. Wire transfer confirmation. The date was 6 months earlier. The amount, $12,000. My pulse thudded in my ears. I scrolled, opening one after another. Dozens, each nearly identical. Wire transfers from the Mitchell Trust account straight into Mitchell's Coffee Company, LLC. My last name. My father's name. Attached to Richard's failing dream. In one email to his partner, Richard wrote, "Don't worry about startup costs. I have access to Linda's daughter's trust fund. She's on scholarship anyway. She doesn't need it. By the time the shops are profitable, we'll put it all back and she'll never know." Except the shops weren't profitable. Lease disputes, broken espresso machines, angry reviews from customers about burnt beans and dirty floors. Every message I opened showed his empire collapsing. By the end of my search, the account balance sat at $127.43. $80,000 drained drip by drip into his fantasy. And then, the part that cut deeper than anything else, the signature cards. Each withdrawal needed 2 signatures. Richard's, scrawled in confident loops, and my mother's, neat, careful, deliberate. Every dollar had been approved by her hand. Christmas morning, I sat across from them at the breakfast table, the emails burning in my pocket like live coals. Mom poured coffee, humming along to the radio. Richard reached for the newspaper. "I know about the trust fund," I said. The air cracked. Mom's cup froze midair. Richard's jaw flexed. "Sarah," Mom began, $80,000 gone while I worked double shifts and racked up student loans. Richard stood slowly, smoothing the front of his shirt. "Sarah, sit down. You're being dramatic. That money wasn't stolen. It was invested. For the family." "It wasn't your money to invest," I snapped. Mom slammed her palm against the table, the mug rattling. "Don't you raise your voice in this house. Richard is trying to build something for all of us. Your father's dead, Sarah. Richard is your family now. The least you can do is support him instead of being selfish." Her words felt like a knife twisting. The same woman who'd rocked me to sleep after Dad's funeral, who had promised we'd always protect each other, was now siding with the man bleeding me dry. "You signed the withdrawals," I whispered. "Every single one." Her face hardened into stone. "Get out." I left. I didn't pack, didn't look back. Snow fell in thick sheets as I drove toward Portland, tears blurring the road until I had to pull over just to breathe. But here's what they didn't know. Before leaving, I had forwarded every email to myself. I had photographed every bank statement I could find in Richard's garage archives, each page proof of theft, and tucked in his desk drawer, half buried under receipts and unpaid bills, was a business card, white embossed in navy ink, Cascade Legal Group, Seattle, the firm that managed my father's trust. On January 2nd, I dialed their number. The receptionist transferred me to an older attorney, Mr. Harrison. His voice was low, weighted with recognition. "Miss Mitchell," he said, "we've been trying to reach you for 3 years." My grip tightened on the phone. Why? His answer made me feel like the ground had opened beneath my feet. The attorney's office smelled like old paper and boiled coffee. Mr. Harrison led me to a low table under a bank of west-facing windows. Dust motes floated in the late light like tiny witnesses. He slid a manila folder toward me and then, almost ceremonially, placed a cream envelope sealed with red wax on top. My name was written across it in my father's hand, rounded, deliberate, the way he addressed birthday cards. "I'm sorry this didn't reach you sooner," Mr. Harrison said. His voice was kind but blunt. "We were required to notify your mother of the withdrawals. When she didn't respond, we escalated. We couldn't force her to act." He tapped the folder. "There's a record of letters. There are also flagged transactions. Legal protocols were followed. But this—" He nodded at the envelope. "This was meant for you." My fingers shook when I broke the wax. The paper inside smelled faintly of pipe tobacco. The handwriting ran tight across the page. It read like a last map. He hadn't just left money, the letter said. He'd left instructions. If anyone tried to touch the fund, I was to know it and fight. If my mother sided with someone else, he warned, that would be her choice, but not mine. He wrote about responsibility, about how money could be used to bind you or set you free. He ended by telling me about a smaller account, $15,000, kept separate and accessible only to me and Mr. Harrison in case I needed to push back. Confession sits heavy in the chest. I had imagined that finding the envelope would be some cathartic moment, a neat reveal where truth would immediately wash away the betrayal. Instead, I felt like I'd been handed instructions for war and handed a weapon I'd never been taught to wield. $15,000 wasn't ransom. It was fuel, attorney retainer, subpoena fees, a way to pry open doors that had been slammed shut by people I loved. As I left the office, the winter street outside felt too bright. I walked to the car with the letter folded inside my coat like contraband. Then my phone lit up. Richard's name on the screen. For a second, I thought it might be a call to apologize. It was a text. "Your mother is hysterical because of you," it read. "She's having chest pains. If anything happens to her, it's your fault. Stop being a vindictive bitch and come home so we can talk like adults." I stared at those words until they went pinprick white on the screen. Another message followed, cruel and practiced. You're just like your father. Selfish. Cold. No wonder he died alone in a car. They read like the same poisonous script he'd used to gaslight every woman who ever trusted him. He knew exactly which buttons to push. Guilt, grief, fear. And he pushed them with the skill of a man who'd practiced manipulation like a craft. I could have deleted him. I could have folded the letter and walked away, letting the law handle the rest. Instead, I called the one. Attorney Mr. Harrison had recommended, Margaret Chen. Her office answered immediately, brisk and efficient. When I explained, breathless, about the trust, the letter, the hidden account, she didn't gasp. She didn't say, "Oh my God." She asked one practical question. How fast can we destroy them? I asked before I knew I was asking it. There was a pause on the other end, then Margaret's voice tightened like wire. How destroyed do you want them? I thought I had finally mapped the betrayal, the stolen fund, the forged signatures, the emails that proved it all. But betrayal has layers, and Richard had built his entire life out of them. Margaret's investigator, Dave, was ex-cop, mid-50s, all blunt edges and nicotine breath. He spent 3 weeks running Richard's name through every system he could access. When he returned, he didn't sit down right away. He tossed a stack of printouts across Margaret's desk and said, "You're not the first, not even close." The stack told the story. 2 ex-wives. Patricia, married in the 90s. Jennifer, early 2000s. Both marriages ended with missing money, failed investments, and accusations that never saw court. Patricia told Dave that Richard had drained $40,000 from her inheritance. Jennifer's records showed joint accounts that bled out in the months before their divorce. Both women described the same pattern. Richard the charmer at the start, Richard the controller at the end. And then came the son I didn't know about. Jake Hoffman, Richard's child with Patricia, estranged for 15 years. When Jake turned 18, his grandfather left him $15,000 for college. Richard was custodian. Jake never saw a penny. It was a pattern, stretching decades. I wasn't special. I was just next in line. But Dave hadn't stopped there. He'd pulled account histories, tax returns, even vendor invoices. The picture sharpened into something uglier than I expected. While Richard was siphoning off my $80,000, he'd also withdrawn $35,000 from my mother's 401k. She hadn't even noticed yet. And he'd cheated his business partner by faking supplier invoices. Another $22,000 gone. Total theft, across victims, over $170,000. I sat there in Margaret's office, staring at the numbers. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was pathology. I called my mother. "Mom, did you know Richard took money from your retirement account?" My voice was shaking. Silence on the other end. "Check it. 35,000 gone." Her breathing turned shallow. "Sarah, stop this. You're trying to turn me against him." "I'm trying to show you what he is. He stole from his ex-wives, from his own son, from you." "Enough!" Her voice cracked, shrill, like she was cornered. "You've always been jealous. You can't stand that I built a life after your father. You want me miserable and alone like you." "Check the account," I said flatly. The line went dead. 2 hours later, the texts began. "Richard, not Linda. You've gone too far. I'm filing for a restraining order." "You stole from me and I'll prove it. My lawyers will bury you. Everyone will know what a psycho you are." Then the one designed to break me. "Your mom's in the ER, stress you caused. Hope you're happy." Margaret warned me this was the playbook. Intimidation, manipulation, manufactured guilt. Still, the words carved into me. My mother lying in a hospital bed, maybe hating me with her last conscious thought. That image nearly made me pick up the phone, nearly made me apologize. That night, for the first time, I almost gave up. I sat with the letter from Dad in my lap and thought maybe Richard had already won. And then an email pinged my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, "I'm Richard's son." We need to talk. I can help you destroy him." The sender's name, Jake Hoffman. Jake Hoffman looked nothing like the man who abandoned him. He carried himself with calm precision, shoulders squared, suit pressed, eyes sharp behind thin frames. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. He slid a black USB drive across the table like it was contraband. 16 years, he said. Every document I could collect. Bank statements, emails, court transcripts. Richard drained my college fund in 2007. I promised myself I'd keep a record. I didn't know what for, until now. I turned the drive over in my palm, as though it might burn me. "Why now?" He leaned back. "Because you're actually fighting him. Everyone else gave up. I did too, once, but I never stopped watching. When your lawsuit showed up in public records, I knew. This is the moment." Back at Margaret's office, we opened the files. It was a paper trail of destruction, multiple states, fake investments, phantom LLCs. The same story repeating across decades. One folder was labeled Nevada. Inside were bank records for Silver Peak Holdings, LLC, an entity Richard had registered under his mother's maiden name. $40,000 hidden away, siphoned from accounts that should have been closed. Margaret swore under her breath. "This isn't just civil fraud, this is federal wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering." She looked at Jake and me with something like admiration. "We're not going to county court anymore, we're going to the FBI." For a brief moment, I felt the ground steady beneath me. My father's letter, Jake's evidence, Margaret's expertise. It all felt like pieces of a net finally tightening around Richard. That illusion shattered 2 nights later. I was leaving Margaret's office after dark, crossing the parking lot with my bag over my shoulder, when headlights swung across my path. A black sedan rolled to a stop. The door opened. Richard stepped out. His face was red, jaw clenched, his fists already balled. "You brought him into this?" His voice was low and shaking. "You dug up Jake?" "He found me," I said, keeping my tone flat. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and clamped his hand around my arm. His grip was a vice, hard enough that I knew it would bruise. "I will end you," he hissed. "I'll make sure you never—" "Let her go!" a security guard shouted, running toward us. Richard released me, but his rage didn't soften. His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "Your father would be ashamed of you. Disgusted." I held his stare. "My father warned me about men like you in his letter. He knew you'd try to twist his memory to control me. You're not the first predator he saw coming." For the first time, Richard faltered. His mouth opened, then closed, like the words had been stolen from him. The guard stopped between us, hand on his radio. Richard backed toward his car, glaring at me as if the sheer force of his hatred could undo me. 2 days later, the undoing was his. FBI agents raided his house at dawn, hauling out boxes of files, computers, hard drives. My phone lit up with call after call from Mom. When I finally answered, her voice was ragged, hysterical. "What did you do? They're everywhere. Agents in my living room rifling through everything." "I reported a crime," I said evenly. "He's your family," she screamed. "He's a thief. He stole from me, from you, from his own son." Her sobbing broke into words sharp enough to slice me. "I wish it had been you in that car crash instead of your father. At least he loved me." The line went dead. I blocked her number. This time, for good. Revenge moved from whispers to a federal courtroom. The marble steps outside the courthouse gleamed under news cameras, and inside, every seat was taken. Lawyers, journalists, and strangers who simply wanted to watch Richard Hoffman fall. The charges were laid out like a litany: federal wire fraud, identity theft, theft from an estate. The civil suit was still alive, but the criminal case carried real teeth, years behind bars. Patricia, the first ex-wife, took the stand. She described how Richard convinced her to invest her inheritance, only to vanish the money in months. Jennifer, the second ex-wife, flew in from Colorado to testify. She described the same charm-to-control cycle, the accounts that mysteriously drained, the debts left behind. Then Jake. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled when he held up the court documents from his grandfather's will. $15,000 meant for him, every cent gone before he turned 19. Richard's old business partner testified, showing the forged invoices, the checks that disappeared into thin air. By the time he stepped down, the jury's expressions had hardened into something close to disgust. Then it was my turn. Richard's lawyer wasted no time. "Miss Mitchell, isn't it true you were hospitalized for mental health issues during college?" I straightened in the chair. "Yes, after my roommate died by suicide, I was hospitalized for anxiety. I asked for help when I needed it. Does that make me unstable, or does it make me responsible?" The room shifted. The juror's eyes moved to the lawyer, not me. He pressed on, but each question only made him sound more desperate. "And isn't it true you accessed Mr. Hoffman's computer without permission?" It was my home. His laptop was unlocked. I was trying to find out what happened to my college fund. "Would you not do the same?" Margaret smirked behind her notes. The lawyer moved on. But the prosecution wasn't finished. They brought out their bombshell. Richard had attempted to open a credit card in my name 6 months earlier to cover his legal fees. The courtroom rippled with shock. Identity theft, against the very person suing him for theft. The air felt electric. Richard shifted in his chair, sweating. And then came the moment I had waited for. Richard took the stand, still performing the role of victim. "I made mistakes," he said solemnly, "but I was only trying to provide for my family." Margaret stepped forward, voice crisp. "Mr. Hoffman, do you have any hidden assets?" "No," Richard said quickly. "You're under oath," she pressed. "I said no." She slid a document onto the rail. "Then what is Silver Peak Holdings, LLC, registered in Nevada under your mother's maiden name, with $43,000 in its account? Funds transferred there after my client filed suit." His face drained of color. Silence spread across the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Hoffman, did you just commit perjury in my courtroom?" Richard opened his mouth, but no sound came. "Bailiff," the judge said, his voice like a gavel strike. "Take Mr. Hoffman into custody." 2 bailiffs seized his arms. Richard twisted, panicked, eyes locking onto mine. "I hope you're happy," he spat as they dragged him past. I didn't blink. I really am. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. Guilty on all counts, 8 years in federal prison, $180,000 in restitution, assets seized, house liquidated, businesses dissolved, Nevada account frozen. I got back more than money, $127,000 in total between the original fund, interest, damages, and costs. But the real victory wasn't the check. It was the sight of Richard Hoffman, cuffed and pale, being led away while my mother sat behind him, stone-faced, finally realizing who she had chosen. As I left the courtroom, Jake was waiting by the doors. "We did it." "We really did," I said, the weight lifting for the first time in 10 years. "Now what?" I pulled out my phone and showed him something I'd been working on. His eyes widened. "Sarah, this is genius. This is perfect." And it was only the beginning. Jail wasn't enough. Richard could rot in a cell, but that didn't erase the damage he'd caused. I wanted to scorch the ground he'd stood on, salt the earth of his reputation so thoroughly that he could never crawl back into anyone's trust again. The week after the verdict, while reporters still camped outside the courthouse, I opened my laptop and started a blog. I called it Stolen Futures. At first, it was just me, typing in the dark, uploading scans of court documents, posting every piece of evidence that had carried me to victory. I used real names. I didn't shield Richard, Linda, or anyone else who signed away my inheritance. The truth belonged in the open. My first post was simple. This is how my stepfather stole my college fund, and how my mother helped him do it. I included photographs of the wire transfers, emails with Richard's smug lines about how I didn't need it, and Dad's letter. the one that told me to fight. By the end of the week, Traffic Counter showed 50,000 views. By the end of the month, it had exploded into the hundreds of thousands. The comments poured in. My uncle stole my settlement after a car accident. My sister took out loans in my name. My parents drained my college fund to pay for my brother's wedding. I wasn't an outlier. I was part of a silent epidemic, and silence had been the abuser's favorite weapon. My blog ripped that weapon out of their hands. Then the news picked it up. Local first, then regional. An investigative reporter emailed asking for an interview. A week later, I was sitting under studio lights recounting my story to a primetime audience. Within days, my inbox filled with requests. Journalists, podcasts, even a Netflix producer who wanted to option the rights for a documentary series on family financial abuse. And Richard's name, it became radioactive. The first 10 pages of Google were flooded with articles about his conviction, his trial, my blog. Employers would never hire him. Friends would never call him. The one thing Richard valued more than money, his image as a successful man, was gone forever. But reputation wasn't the only thing that crumbled. Karma had one last strike to deliver. 6 months after the trial, Linda called me. It was the first time I'd heard her voice since the day she wished I'd died instead of Dad. She sounded broken. "Sarah, I need your help." I let the silence hang until she added, "It's the credit cards. He opened them in my name. $60,000. I didn't even know. My credit's destroyed. The bank won't touch me. I'm going to lose the house." Part of me expected to feel satisfaction, but mostly I felt tired. "So now you believe me?" Her voice cracked. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Please, Sarah, I don't have anyone else." I remembered sitting at our kitchen table when she told me Richard was family now. I remembered her hands slamming the EAT table, calling me selfish for demanding my own inheritance. And most of all, I remembered her voice, cold and venomous, saying, "I wish it had been you in that car crash instead of your father." I repeated it back to her slowly. "You told me you wished I died. Do you think I forgot that?" She sobbed into the phone. "I didn't mean it. I was scared. I was angry. You signed the papers, every one of them. You defended him in court. You called me a liar while he drained you dry. And now you want me to save you?" "I'll lose everything," she whispered. "You already did. You lost me." I had the money. Between restitution and damages, I could have written a check to cover her debt and saved her house. But I didn't. Forgiveness isn't a blank check, and I wasn't about to fund the same cycle of denial and avoidance that had nearly destroyed me. Linda lost the house, declared bankruptcy. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Gresham, working retail at 56, living paycheck to paycheck. People told me I was cruel for letting her fall, that she was still my mother. But those people hadn't watched their own mother sign away their future for a con man, and I never forgot my father's letter. Fight. Don't let anyone steal your future. He hadn't written, "unless it's your mother." He'd written, "anyone." The world spun on. My blog turned into a platform, then a movement. Survivors shared their stories. Lawyers reached out offering pro bono work, and slowly family financial abuse became a conversation instead of a shameful secret. Every time someone posted, "Because of this blog, I confronted my family," I felt my father's voice echo. Fight. But Richard wasn't finished with me. A year after the raid, a year after the trial, I opened my mailbox to find a thick envelope covered in prison stamps. The handwriting was his. Angry slashes instead of letters. 6 pages of venom, every line dripping with rage. "You destroyed my life over money. You turned my son against me. You ruined your mother. You'll never be anything but vindictive. Your father would be ashamed." I held the letter in my hands and realized it wasn't just a message. It was a gift. Proof that even locked away, stripped of everything, Richard still couldn't take accountability. He couldn't admit guilt. He couldn't change. I scanned every page and posted it to Stolen Futures with one caption: This is what abusers sound like when they finally face consequences. No remorse, only blame. Save this letter. Show it to anyone who tells you to forgive family. This is who they want you to forgive. The post went viral in a way even my trial coverage hadn't. 200,000 shares in a week. Advocates forwarded it to Richard's parole board. His shot at early release evaporated before he even applied. That was the final revenge. Not just the handcuffs, not just the restitution. It was watching Richard's words, the same manipulations he used to control us, become the evidence that buried him even deeper. And for the first time since I was 18, I felt free. The letter from Richard was 6 pages of bile. No remorse, no responsibility, just accusation. He blamed me for his prison sentence, for Jake's testimony, for Linda's collapse. He spat the same phrases he had always used: selfish, vindictive, ungrateful. He even weaponized my father's memory, insisting Dad would be ashamed of me. I read it twice, then did exactly what he feared. I scanned every page and posted it on Stolen Futures. No edits, no commentary beyond one caption. This is what abusers sound like when they finally face consequences. No accountability, only blame. If anyone asks you to forgive family, show them this. The internet erupted. Hundreds of thousands of shares, thousands of comments, advocacy groups forwarding the letter to parole boards. By the time Richard applied for early release, the board had already read his words in national headlines. His request was denied before it ever reached a hearing. He stayed exactly where he belonged, inside. But my life wasn't just about him anymore. Jake and I built something lasting from the ashes, the Emma Mitchell Foundation, named after my father's middle name. Our mission was simple: give young people what I never had when my trust fund vanished: legal representation, therapy, emergency housing. Within 2 years, we had helped 47 survivors recover more than $600,000 in stolen funds. Every check restored wasn't just money. It was proof that family betrayal didn't have to be the end of someone's story. Linda reached out again after Richard's parole denial. She'd been in therapy, she said. She'd stopped drinking. She wanted to apologize face to face. We met in a quiet cafe, years of distance sitting heavier than the mugs between us. Her voice shook as she said the words I had needed for so long. I'm sorry. I chose him over you. I signed those papers. I told you things a mother should never say. Tears slid down her cheeks. I want to make it right. I want us to be family again. I looked at her, and for once I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Thank you for apologizing, I said. But I don't forgive you, and I don't want a relationship. I hope you find peace, just not with me. Her tears fell harder. She nodded, stood, and walked out of my life for the last time. People ask me if I regret it. If I lie awake at night wondering if I was too harsh, too final. The answer is no, because revenge was never about cruelty. It was about reclaiming my story. Boundaries aren't betrayal. Silence protects abusers. And fighting back isn't revenge, it's survival. If Richard calls me vindictive, if Linda calls me cold, so be it. In my story, the only one that matters, I'm the woman who refused to stay silent. I'd love to know where this story reaches you, what corner of the world you're listening from, and whether it echoes something you've lived through. Leave a comment, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support fuels every story, every survivor we help, and every voice that refuses to stay quiet. Because survival is only the first step. Thriving is the rest of the journey.